Hello, welcome to the Orykl Podcast. Today, I'm really honored to welcome Angie Fenimore. She is a New York Times and international bestselling author, empathetic healer, and spiritual empowerment coach. Her extraordinary journey began with surviving childhood abuse, which fueled her passion for legal reform. Angie played a pivotal role in passing laws in Washington state that became a national model for stiffening penalties for violent sex offenders. In 1991, a life-altering near-death experience following a suicide attempt profoundly transformed her perspective. Chronicled in her best-selling book, Beyond the Darkness, My Near-Death Journey to the Edge of Hell and Back, her story is one of divine love, forgiveness, and the power of choice. Angie now channels her experiences to help others heal and find their purpose, offering coaching for spiritual empowerment and writing. She also co-hosts the award-winning Calliope Writing Coach podcast and facilitates the acclaimed SLC Compel, Polish, Pitch, and Sign Writers Conferences. Please join me in welcoming Angie. Thank you, Angie, for being here.
Thank you so much, Huenu.
So I just read that, obviously, that did not come out of my head. Um, but before we get started with your whole story, which is incredible, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about Angie now? What are you doing now? Who are you now?
Okay, I love this. Starting with the great stuff. So, I just turned 61 years old, and I'm living the dream. My husband, we've been together, I don't know, over a decade. We actually don't know when we got married. Well, neither one of us do. And so I have five grown children, and he has five grown children. And we up and moved to Alaska a few years ago, and we are homesteading. And when I say homesteading, I'm in a trailer inside the house that we're building right now so that we're protected from the elements while we build. And I do writing coaching. A lot of my students are best-selling award-winning authors. My student with the most awards has just won her 65th award. And they are out there making a big difference in the world. Regardless of the genre, you can change hearts and minds with sci-fi, fantasy, or self-help. It doesn't actually matter. And so that's one of the superpowers that I came back with, is how to effectively make a difference in telling your story such that you are impacting others. And this is my access to making a difference in the world.
I love that. I really do, because I think, first of all, everybody has a story worth telling. And we think we
Everybody.
don't, but everybody does. That's the first
Mhm.
thing. And the
Mhm.
second thing is that we are story human beings. I mean, we resonate with stories. We have our own stories. We feel like, oh, yes, that could be me. We hear with stories. And yeah, this is how the world works. And sometimes we can't get our wonderful work across because we don't know how to tell it, right? And I also think that it's wonderful because it sounds like you are living your purpose. It sounds like
Yeah.
you have found it, and this is very unique. And you've got these, and look how happy it's making you. So, how
Yes.
important to find our purpose, right?
Right.
Mm.
Exactly.
So, take us to the beginning of your life. I know you had a pretty rough childhood,
I
and
did.
yeah, take us. What was your childhood like? And you can go as
So,
deep as
yeah.
shallow
So
as
it
you
was
want.
really idyllic until I was about 9. When it was the 70s. And it's kind of all I gotta say. It was the 70s. And my mother just she started going to college. We had just moved from Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada, which is like there's a lot of spiritual darkness in Las Vegas. Um, and she suffered from phobias and, chronic anxiety, which actually runs in the family. And so she took a class from a professor who had a cult basically in the recesses of Bryce Canyon in Utah, like deep in, 5 mile hike in. Um, and it was like they lived in teepees, there was no power, and there was some really, really awful stuff happening. Like an example is there was one little boy who was my age who had a lisp, and he was being punished for having this lisp, and he was made to live across the river from everybody else in his own teepee. He was only allowed his underwear and bread and water once a day. They regularly shaved heads of kids and took shoes so that you couldn't escape. And I was there. I spent a lot of time there, but we lived with my father, and I was there over Thanksgiving. And poor Petey was begging for food, and all the other kids were terrified, and I didn't know why. I'm like, yeah, sure, meet me under the cook shack after it gets dark. And I loaded him up a plate, and then somebody ratted me out. And the next day, I was called to what they called the hot seat during group therapy, and I was then deprived of food. And I looked to my mother like, are you kidding me? And she just was compliant, devastated and compliant.
Oh,
And so that was an experience that actually was formative for me. It was one of those core memories, right?
yeah,
That
sure.
I could not rely on my mother. And like I developed this belief that she didn't love me and she didn't want me. And then my father was off the deep end, just off the deep end, alcoholic, functioning, could go to work. But so it was pretty awful. My sister and I were dragged to orgies and, not made to participate, but we were like cognizant of all this stuff and
Wow.
sexually abused. And it was just horrific, right? And
Sure.
then, so then it looks like, there's light on the horizon, and he remarries to my stepmother. And I look just like my mom, like spit image. And my father always just pined for my mother. And so my stepmother, all of it kind of like landed on me. And
Oh,
so she hated me. And I'm gonna correct that. I don't think she hated me, but I think that she was young and didn't know what she was doing and
mm,
had her own like mental issues.
yeah.
And so anyway, so I caught it. So that was it. And so I thought, okay, fine. I'm getting married. I got married really young, and from frying pan to the fire. And so um and then the way that we understand now how trauma works is that it's not like as a child you're just coping with it. Okay, you just develop coping mechanisms. It doesn't explode until you're an adult. And so it was when I was changing laws governing violent sex offenders in the state of Washington, and this is like 89, 90, you know, we didn't understand a lot. Uh, like I started to develop like this thing where I would go off the deep end for a couple of weeks every 6 months, and just a lot of risky behaviors, and didn't understand. I tried to get help. Nobody like the psychological community didn't understand or know what was going on. But I had all these people that were coming to me wanting help. Okay. And there was no help. And so this drove up, and I started having memories come back. Um,
Right.
and I was in the middle of one of those when I was just the risky behavior. We had gone to Japan. I had my oldest two kids, my two little boys at the time, and 5 and 2 years old. And I had in my sweats and slippers on an island, okay, on a military base. Like I don't know what I was thinking. I went to go get milk, and I did not return home for 2 days. So I
Mm,
finally walk in the door, and my kids and my husband are praying for my safe return. And my husband, now my ex-husband, but we remained close friends, um, was just white as a sheet. And I, just felt like I'm going to continue this for the rest of my life. There's no help. And the next day, my oldest child wouldn't speak to me. He was so angry. And my youngest wouldn't let me put him down. So it was that night that I just felt like I was sentenced to this and that I was sentencing my family to this. I saw no other way out. And, frankly, I'd had suicidal ideation since the time I was 14. Um, so, and I had undiagnosed bipolar disorder too. So, that doesn't help.
It's so
Um,
hard for me to even imagine myself in your shoes. Like I try and I'm listening to you and I'm going, wow. And what must that have felt like? And I realize that I can't, I can't put myself in that situation and I don't want to, obviously, it's like
right,
my heart, it's like there's a point where my heart just doesn't want to go right
right,
below. Yeah.
right. I
Um,
just feel like it's
so
really important for people to understand that so that they can get, how
yes.
does this young mother do this? Because
I
I
mean,
thought
and
I was
also
doing
I'm
it
very interested because you just started with telling us who you are today, and you were saying that you are like the happiest you've ever been. And this is
right.
amazing because I'm hearing this probably one of the worst things that could happen to anybody or up there. It's like it's
Uh,
horrendous. It's not
yeah,
put one worse than the other, but like up there. And what a difference. So it's the middle part must be interesting too, if you went from that to this.
right,
So tell us now, you tried to commit suicide, right?
right.
Um, and you had your near-death experience.
Yes. So
Tell
the first thing that
us
happened
about
for
that.
me, I
Yeah.
was went straight to my life review, which
Mm,
is what you experience basically your life from beginning to end. And I didn't understand that's what was going on at first. Because I was seeing like this membrane, yellow, like lit membrane with these red capillaries running through it. And I was being squeezed like this. And it wasn't until later that I realized, well, that was my birth. Like began at my birth. And
oh,
then
wow.
thing that is I'm being held like this, being cradled. And like I said, I look just like my mom. And so I'm looking at this woman, but the thing is I'm experiencing her point of view too. So I can't tell if I'm the baby or the woman.
Mm,
And but the important thing that I got was that my mother loved and wanted me. And so there was this instant like
wow.
recognition, my point of view is not the truth. And so I went all the way through to the end of my life where I'm laying there on the couch, all the way, every moment. But I got it from everybody's perspective, not just my own. And so then, I'm standing in this darkness, just this field of darkness that you can see forever, just like you're in space, outer space. And thinking, okay, I've done this and kind of proud of myself. And looking for my grandmother and my uncle who died and my cousin who'd passed at 11 years old and nobody there, right? And but there was a presence next to me. I could hear his voice, but I couldn't see him. And I just heard his voice say, well, this is your life. This is the life you lived. That was it. There was no drama, significance about it. Just like, this is it. Just the facts, Jack. And so I swung my head to the right, looking for my dead family members. And there's a line of teenagers next to me, and they are just empty, empty, empty. And I had this thought, oh, we must be the suicides. And the kid standing next to me, not like hurt me. Like there was no emotion there or no life there with them, with any of them. But I realized my thoughts are audible. Okay. And that was the thing that triggered each piece of the experience for me was my own thoughts. And so I was taken from them. And I traveled through this darkness, just speed of light. And then I landed in this like long beltway, like, I don't know, 30 feet deep or so. And just as far as I could see, thousands of people. And but like nobody really on the right. I like lit down into this space, and everybody's they're all disconnected from each other. Some of them are talking to themselves, but there's no acknowledgement between each other, even though we're all like tight in this space. And there was this one man that was looking at me, and he was the only one, and he was squatting. And I thought, and this was my own thought, I thought, I wonder if this is Judas Iscariot, because I knew he'd killed himself. And Judas Iscariot was the disciple who betrayed Christ. And that thought is an acknowledgement that I believe in a Christ, right? And so the moment I have this thought, there's this pinpoint of light in the distance. And as this light approached, it traveled at tremendous speed toward me. And all this happened very quickly, but it came to me. It stopped outside this invisible barrier. I knew that it couldn't come in. It was a form of a human, of a man, and he was made of light. And all this energy, there was this dark mist of energy in this space where I was. It's all vibrating. This is God, this is God, this is God. So I'm standing there with him, and I'm just looking at him and kind of dumbfounded. And he says, "Is this what you really want?" And I say, "But my life is so hard." And he says, "You think it's hard now?" He's like, "You can't skip over parts. It's supposed to be hard. We've all done this. You've been a tool for evil." Like it just kind of like the things a father says to a daughter, um, who he loves deeply. And that daughter is like kind of screwing up. You know what I mean? It was like that kind of a conversation. But even so, I just couldn't see any way out because I couldn't see any choice. I had tried desperately, and I didn't see choice. So then I hear another voice, and at the same time see these pinpricks of light coming through what I realize, oh, there's this invisible like membrane,
Yeah.
you know, that's like holding us in this beltway. And it's the same voice that was with me at the beginning of the near-death experience that said, "This is your life." And he says to me, "Don't you understand? I did this for you." And when he says that, suddenly I am taken to multiple points of view. I am still standing here in this darkness and seeing, who I perceive to be like God the Father. And then I'm also behind these two and seeing them and then seeing myself in this darkness. And I see who I know to be Christ in that moment download this information like this light that passes to God the Father, and it is my life, all the information about my life. And in that moment, I am also taken inside the body of Christ 2,000 years back when he is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's experiencing my life as if it was his own. And then, and I realized then that's what happened. That's what he did for all of us.
Wow.
And so even then, I still didn't see how I could do this, like I didn't see any pathways. And so then I was shown what would happen to my kids without me. Now I have five now, but then they were, so my 39-year-old was 5 years old. And I was shown what would happen to them, like the emotional journey of their life. And I saw my oldest get to about 20 years old ish, right around there, 18, 20. And he was empty, filled with darkness, just like those kids that were next to me at the beginning. And I knew they had taken their lives. He was like that. That's where he was energetically dead
Mm.
and rendered completely incapable of doing anything he was meant to do here.
Wow.
And then my younger boy, who was 3 years younger, 2 years old at the time, now 36 years old, he got to about 7 or 8 years old, and then he was taken because he could not even do this life without his mother. And when I saw that, that's when my heart changed. And there was just this little eensy beatsy, like glimpse of an okay. I didn't even speak it, just a smidge of a thought. Okay. And when that happened, I was just like lifted out of this space. And suddenly I was above it and watching all these people that are dropping in on the right. And I'm told basically this is where most people are going is to a place of darkness. But I also understood that it was also like a place where you work out your stuff. And I later came to understand that these people who were talking to themselves there, they were probably also having conversations with God and with loved ones, working out, you know, their salvation. Because it's once we take responsibility for
Mm.
all of it is when we are free.
Mm.
And so I knew it was not a permanent place. And then I'm like, angels, like, these beings of light all around me. And I say,
Hey,
what is
I
this?
mean it's crazy. I mean it's
Yeah.
a movie I would watch, and it sounds like, and I've interviewed a lot of people that have had NDEs, and everyone's a little bit different, which is quite
Mm,
interesting.
mhm,
There are
mhm.
similarities, but everyone's very
Yes,
unique. And so I
yes.
find each one absolutely fascinating. So yeah, keep going. You came back eventually, right?
Yeah. So there are like 14 or 17, I can't remember the exact number of points
Yeah.
that NDEers have in common, no
Oh,
matter what your belief system is. And
okay.
we all experience all of them. I did,
Yeah.
um, except for the pillar of light. I didn't
Yeah.
have the tunnel of light.
Okay.
Um, but it's this profound love. That's the big thing
That's a
that
big thing.
well, everybody seems to come back with.
Yeah.
Um,
Everyone.
but so I traveled back to my body. I was like just downloaded with this information. And I was like, what are they doing? What is this? And I'm told they're helping you. They have been all this time. And I was shown things about the earth and the world that like are coming to fruition now. Um, I was shown how it's small things, the little things that we do that make this huge difference, this ripple effect. Um, and then when I came back into my body and sat up, I kept the ability to see spiritual light and darkness in physical things. I came back with this ability to see light and darkness on a spiritual level in physical things. So I looked at the couch and it was vibrating. All the molecules were vibrating. We are couch, serving you, serving God. Pillow, we are serving you, serving God. You know, my plants were made of light. Trees. There's a reason I live in Alaska. I am
Yeah.
surrounded by trees, and trees are sentinels. They are made of light.
Love trees.
Um,
Isn't that,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
they're all amazing.
So
But
I
and you
it
physically
changed me.
saw things, you physically
Mhm.
saw things,
Yeah.
well as felt things, and because it's
Mhm.
also a very common thing that I don't know what percentage, but a lot of people that come back from NDEs have their, clairs opened and they
Mhm.
start feeling and sensing things. So it's
Yeah.
quite a common phenomenon, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I
So a
suppose,
lot, a lot came back with me, right? I didn't come back the same person.
yeah.
I was not the same person. Um, and it took a little bit of time for this thing to dissolve and go away, this every 6 months,
Yeah.
dropping into this deep depression and anxiety and then engaging in risky behaviors. But I never engaged in risky behaviors again after that. And then I was walking around the lake where I lived after I moved back to the States. I was in Washington State and I felt it coming on. This was actually just prior to the book coming out. So it's a couple years later. And I was just praying and I heard the same voice. Now I recognize that voice, right? Um, say the truth will make you free. And so then I was just like, oh, okay, what in my life am I not taking responsibility for? And as soon as I realized, like, oh, this is because I need an out. I need a, I want to engage in risky behavior. Part of me does want to.
Mhm.
And if I can blame some kind of a a disorder that nobody can understand. And then it was gone. It was just gone. I'm not saying this is true for everybody, right?
Yeah.
But for me, that was the way it went. And so I just wasn't the same person. And I could still see light and darkness to this day. And, and I can, all of us have these abilities. It's
Yeah.
not like anybody doesn't. You're
I'd
born
love
with,
I'd love to ask you something. It's a touchy question.
sure,
But I think it's something that goes through people's minds um, a lot. Like, I wouldn't consider myself religious, right?
right.
But
Hmm.
I am understanding that all religions at their base are spirit or spirituality,
Hmm.
right? They're trying to explain spirituality in a certain way. And they explain
Yeah,
it with different books and they explain it with different teachers.
right.
But I consider myself spiritual. And I think that part of all religions, that is the real spiritual part, I resonate with.
Right.
And then there's just so much division with all these different
Right.
religions because they're
Right.
right and the rest are wrong.
Exactly.
That's
Hmm.
just every single one of them is right.
Every
I'm
one of them.
wrong, you're right, you're
Exactly.
wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. And so we have a problem, right? And this is what I don't like about religion.
Right.
And how do you explain, how do you tie, let's say, Christianity,
Right.
Jesus, God with this? Because
Hmm.
what is, and I say it's a touchy question because, I don't want to go into like
No,
religious
you're good. I
conversation.
love that you asked
Yeah,
this.
yeah, because it's what
So,
goes through people's
yeah,
mind, and I think sorry,
exactly.
like the way I perceive it, it's like if people only understood it differently,
Mm,
then they'd be cool with
exactly.
it. You know what I mean? And then we wouldn't
Exactly.
have wars, by the way, and then we'd accept everybody's point of view because
Exactly.
we would get it.
Very good.
So yeah, so
Exactly. Yeah,
what's
there's
your
the key
view,
right
on
there.
religion
Yeah.
and spirituality,
I
and how does Christianity and spirituality, where do they meet?
so I don't actually believe in absolute truth, except for in point of view. Like, for example, if we all and this is totally possible, we could do this. We don't because we don't know that we can. But if we each stood in each other's shoes and got, like, as soon as I became a stepmother, I got my stepmother and she stopped being the evil, villain in my story. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then I can see, holy cow, she was only 27 years old. Oh my gosh. And I was like, did not accept her. Like, no wonder, right? When we can see in from each other's points of view, war ends, hunger ends, sex trade, slavery ends, all of it ends because we get each other, right? And I'm talking about even the most vile among us. If we
Well,
could be in their shoes.
I
Yeah,
always say, imagine what somebody must have gone through to
yeah,
kill another person.
exactly.
In fact, it makes me
Uh-huh.
cry for the killer because I cannot
Yeah,
imagine like child's life, what he
yes,
must have seen, what he must have suffered
exactly.
to have the heart to kill, to want to, something so
Yeah,
dark in him to want to do that. So
yeah,
like you say, if we could see, not that, it's not about pardoning, or in a way it's about pardoning somebody, it's about understanding, it's about knowing that we're all actually
right.
trying our best, right? For the
Yes.
most part, with what we've got,
We're
what we
all
get,
just
our
doing
whole
our best with what we got.
mm,
And we all start out as, babies in our mother's arms. We all do,
yeah.
pure and innocent. And then we have experiences that are traumatizing that alter us. And then, but here's the kicker is how we respond with our survival machinery. We're just trying to figure it out. And I go so far as to say, if I were in somebody else's shoes, if I lived their life, I'd make their choices too. Because you have to get that you're getting the like there's the DNA, there's
Yeah,
the
lots, like
history of
lots.
hundreds of years that gets passed down in our genes, in our cells. And then there's every single moment that happened to them and how they responded to that, what their
Mhm.
interpretation is of that. Every bully was once bullied. Every, like, all of it.
Yes,
But so
absolutely.
as far as religion goes, it's like I'm not religious either. And I do believe that it can serve and that it gets all muddled. They all do. It always does.
Yeah,
Um, so religion becomes a vehicle for people to justify doing
exactly.
things that are absolutely not coming from a source of light. And
Mm,
so if that religion works for you, you're not experiencing thoughts, feelings, hatred towards others because of that religion. It's not causing harm and it's doing you good. Get on that horse and ride it. It doesn't actually matter. Um,
yeah,
any and every vehicle. And it doesn't matter that different near-death experiencers experience God differently. I do believe that also a near-death experience, it's like this is part of the miracle of it, is that we drive it to a degree. I do believe this, that near-death experience is the reason that there are so many different, you know, ways that it
mm,
happens. It's because there's this compassion from, this source that gave us life or, that provides light, whatever, however you interpret it. It's a compassionate thing that it's delivered to us in a way that we can absorb it. So you're bringing your belief system across with you. And so the near death experience that you're having is somewhat plated, like you're at a restaurant, plated for you to be
yeah, yeah.
consumable.
Yeah, incredible. Well, it makes sense because our life has been completely unique. Only
Mhm.
I have experienced my life. No one else comes even close.
Exactly.
And when I die, why should I experience exactly the same thing as everybody else, right? So it's tailored to
Nope.
me. It
Yep.
makes sense. Um,
Exactly.
so we're gonna end off soon. I'd like to ask you two last questions. The first question is, what would you like people to know about themselves, about who they are? And why do you
Right.
think that's important?
Okay, good. So, first and foremost, every human being, it is in your DNA. You got this like it's your birthright. Okay. Number one, you're a storyteller and it just gets trained out of you. And storytelling is your access to changing lives, to being effective in changing lives. And number two, your access to freedom and forgiveness. And it's when we hang on to stuff that keeps us small. Like all of us are, we're not separate. We are connected. We're breathing the same air that was breathed in China 2000 years ago. We're 70% water. All the same water is on this planet that it always was and will be. We are the same. We are like cellularly the same. So it's really, really interesting and strange that we relate to each other like we're separate. And it's only because we have these two eyes and these two ears and this body that we relate like I'm isolated. You're not. So if you're struggling, find a tribe, create one, do what you've got to do, connect with others. And then there are a lot of people that are interested in watching podcasts that I'm on because they're struggling, right, with suicidal thoughts or they've lost somebody to suicide. So it's really important to know that I have seen for myself three separate people who ended their lives by suicide, and they are in good places, all of them. And so I know from my own experience that where I went, you should not interpret that that's where your loved one is. Okay. It's individual completely. All right. And number two, if you are struggling, speak out. Don't end your life. Don't do that because it's so important. You never know what you're doing to make a difference. Like, for example, my oldest is now an RN and has saved many, many, many lives, impacts many, many lives with healing. He and his wife have these three darling children who are amazing human beings. You don't know. You're just at a dip. Okay. You're at a dip, and human beings, we live story. So if there's a dip, guess what?
Yeah.
It must go up. That is the way of it.
Amazing, Angie. Thank you so much. I mean,
You're so
what an
welcome.
incredible story. I mean, what a
Thank you
great
for having me,
example
Wendy.
of, yeah,
Yeah.
what a great example of, what suffering can lead to eventually and how people can really, really change their lives around. It's all perspective, as you said it, and it's beautiful. So thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you, and thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, we were just, I'm living my purpose, right? So I'm so
Yeah.
excited because I know I'm living my purpose, and I really want to hopefully, get as many other people on the same path, living their
Yeah.
purpose. Because life changes completely when you kind of follow your heart and when you do what you came here to do. Everything else, just, all the pieces start like
And you impact so many
you
others
do.
just by
Yeah.
virtue of what you're vibrating, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly.
It's
Okay,
great.
amazing. Thank you,
Okay.
Angie. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Dylan.
Bye bye.